What genuinely changed your life? I had a spillage with a bottle of liquid LSD and ended up drinking about 15 to 20 doses. I spent most of the next 18 hours in complete ego death and depersonalization so extreme I have no real recollection of it because my mind wasn't treating it as a personal experience. But one part one do remember. Below wherever my psyche had positioned itself was a jigsaw puzzle. The design on it was abstract but had form. The pieces were flashing different colors. I understood that this jigsaw was my mind. At first it looked fine, but through frantic flashing the out-of-place pieces revealed themselves to me. When they revealed themselves, I understood what psychological conflict they represented. When I put them in the correct place, I understood the root of that psychological conflict. When I came back Earth, I spent a few hours convinced I was the reincarnation of Lord Buddha, then went to bed. The next day I woke up and, I cannot stress how much I mean this, for the first time in my 27 years on Earth I felt like I understood myself. It completely changed my life. I had been angry and depressed and frustrated and confused for as long as I could remember, unable to control my negative emotions or process past traumas and negative or damaging experiences. All that went in one fucking night. The roots are still there, but I know what they are and understand them. I gained a peace and calmness that allowed me to be the person I'd always felt like I was but couldn't be, and actually live my life. I'd taken lots of LSD before that day and lots since, but looking back now in my 40s, with a BA and master's degree earned after going back to education 4 months after this experience, moving away from my hometown, traveling the world, living without fear. I have no idea where I'd be if the pipette hadn't slipped out of that bottle, or if I'd had the good sense not to drink all the spillage from my cupped hand. Some part of me knew I needed it. I have a feeling I'll get downvoted here just for even mentioning it because Reddit tends to swing against this violently, so to disclaim, if this is even read, this is not meant to proselytize or convert. This is entirely my own personal story. Religion, particularly God, saved my life. When I was 19 to 20, I hit an extremely low point in my life. I was going through mandatory military service and going through a pretty heavy rejection from a girl I liked. But at least I had a goal. I was gonna become a commander in a pretty elite unit. 2 weeks before graduating though, I was diagnosed with pneumonia, even though the civilian doctors said it was a mild chest cold, and so I was immediately dropped from the course, deemed not combat ready, and forced into admin for 6 months. In that time, I basically hit a depression spiral. I felt lonely, so I sought comfort in prostitutes. I hated myself, and drowned my sorrows in food. I became extremely bitter about everything in life. My weight skyrocketed in the military. I felt like I literally had nothing left to live for. I only stopped because my parents caught wind of my expenses and started questioning me, and since there weren't that many things that can justify blowing $1,000 in 14 days, I don't drink, I had to come clean. It was messy and really humiliating, but after the initial fallout my mom rang up a family friend who happened to be a Christian and asked if he could help. He was close to my sister. He brought me to church and I started going regularly after leaving the military. I started going for the community and company, but believe me, belief and faith were the last things on my mind. I had been to church before and just never bought into the whole thing. Even if I did go for God, why would this God forgive someone like me, who not only knew about his existence before but spat on it for just pursuing my own pleasure? God only blesses the good and punishes the wicked, right? In the first year, that was my thought process. I honestly thought I would go for about a year or two to placate my parents and then slowly just leave and not think about it. And then one day in 2019, during a youth church camp in Batum, I heard God's voice in my head. For context, I know it isn't my voice for a few reasons. I was absolutely knackered up to that point, having had a full day of games followed by dinner. The only thoughts in my head at the point was to get the sermon over with and to get to bed. It was a deep but warm voice, and it just said one sentence: I've been here, and I'll always be here for you. And I just broke. I broke down, I cried, in sadness and yet joy. Sadness that I had been so disappointing, and yet joy that God was real, and He still loved a failure like me. That was 3 years ago, and I just got baptized last year. And honestly, knowing God was real literally changed my life. I lost the weight that I put on in the military, I got my life in order, even got a girlfriend, we recently ended things but still, and I have a direction in life now. Most important though, is the hope. I have hope in not just life but in people now. People can change even when no one believes they can. I realize religion is a contentious subject on Reddit, so again, I am not trying to convert or proselytize. I simply just wanted to share that story. Couple of things. I had chronic and debilitating IBS for most of my adult life. In October 2018, I collapsed after feeling poorly for a couple of weeks. Ended up spending almost 8 months in hospital, almost died twice. I'd an internal abscess caused by a dead bit of colon. They eventually were able to operate and I now have a stoma. What I no longer have is IBS. That has massively improved my life. However, during the operation my sciatic nerve was pinched and I can only partially feel my right leg below the knee and walk with a cane. On good days I can walk around the house without it, on bad days, going any further than a few meters requires my wheelchair. The experience, hospital and all I went through, has left me with PTSD and not helped my depression, but I have a great GP now who is helping me with that. The thing that changed my life the most, however, is a person. My husband. We were friends from I was 18. In my early 30s we started dating and we've now been married 11 years. I couldn't have gotten through any of it without him. He's my rock. And having someone in your life that you know loves you, that shows you every day, that supports you and is genuinely your best friend. It gave me something to fight for, it helps me through the days I feel so low I can't function. He really is my life. This is probably super stupid, but hear me out. A quote from a savage raid fight in Final Fantasy XIV. Fate Walker, or as anyone who plays the game would know it as E11S. He says it right before a mechanic my raid leader would just call out his turn 2, so it was towards the end of the fight. No, she still needs me. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with the game, Fate Walker was a combination of two father figures for Rein, a teenager in the game. That savage tier did some pretty wacky things, pulling memories from the player character and creating some funky combinations, and that's what happened with that fight for her. Part of that story was her letting go of one of the father figures because she wasn't able to see him anymore, long story, and surviving with the friends and allies she had. But for me, it echoed something in my soul the third or fourth time we were there. The way the voice actor delivered it was powerful and like he absolutely had to survive the encounter. I was in the middle of a really messy divorce from my emotionally, mentally, and financially abusive ex-husband. In my state, it can be seen as abandonment of property if one spouse moves from the house during the divorce, but his threats and harassment were so bad, we had enough evidence for me to leave, of course not get a restraining order though. He was awful through the whole divorce that started in October 2019 and got messed up from the pandemic. We're still having court dates because he refuses to do stuff from the divorce decree. I was stuck in my parents' unheated, unfinished basement, depressed, broke. He kept stealing money for bills from me to pay for whatever he wanted because my lawyer told me I had to keep the joint account for a while, in awful pain from my fibromyalgia, dealing with bullshit from him and my parents about never being good enough for anyone. I kept trying to protect my toddler daughter from her father's temper and my mother's random lack of patience. I have had severe anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation with a couple attempts since I was a small child that my family basically ignored that treatment and therapy was helping, but everything piled on, so I, like many others during the pandemic, was really struggling. And then thankard as the Fate Walker delivered that line and I started crying. I'm even tearing up typing this. I can't leave my daughter to the mess of family around us. I'm her primary caregiver. She's with me 6 out of 7 nights a week. I can't leave her to people that would mock her feelings and belittle her worries. She doesn't deserve to be torn down over and over for reasons that I still don't understand why they did it to me. I can't even imagine suicide, never mind attempt it, because she still needs me. I still can't believe it was that got through to me, but damn, if I ever have the opportunity to meet that actor I will probably just act like an idiot and cry. And now that I have survived that whole awful mess, I basically stare everything else down because I don't think it can be worse than what I went through. Nearly dying. Took it happening twice before it really changed me, though. I have never been a people person. Even before I started having chronic health issues, I would avoid being around people, and when I was around them, I would usually avoid conversations. When I got so sick that I was mostly homebound, it was kind of a good thing, because I didn't get as depressed as most people would be. After I nearly died last year, things didn't change that much. But this year I spent around 7 months in the hospital after having a pulmonary embolism and a hemorrhagic stroke, and it was like people were drawn to talk to me. I had nurses and techs who would come spend 30 minutes to an hour in my room just to talk. Instead of finding it uncomfortable, like I used to, I welcomed them. I listened, and I found myself talking more as well. Then people I know would come to visit, and they would stay for a while. I started reaching out to friends and family members who I hadn't spoken to for a while. It's like the stroke changed that part of my personality. I am much more friendly than I used to be.